Very good. Then thank you, Moeen, for that. We are in, certainly, as Peter, I mean, we couldn't have written anything better than that. It was beautiful, absolutely. You've summed up the situation. It is dire. And I wanted to open with this. I'm informed that a finance ministry from a third world kingdom was called by Dr. John Edwards, an official acting on behalf of the debt rescheduling department of the IMF / World Bank. On returning his call some days later, the finance minister was informed that unfortunately Dr. Edwards had died and that someone else would be put in touch with after his funeral, which was taking place as they spoke. An hour later, the minister called again, asking to speak to Dr. Edwards, only to be informed yet again that the Dr. Edwards had died and his replacement would be in touch as soon as possible. Again, every hour for 4 hours, the minister kept calling. Finally, the exasperated official said, "For goodness sake, why do you keep calling?" He said, "We just love hearing about it." so that summed it up. So debt, it is apocryphal, but I thought it was too good to miss. So in actual fact, it was said about the Mashriq Bank, the manager of a Mashriq Bank in Dubai, and it was said that somebody went in and actually that happened. So I can't mention the branch or the name, but I have to tell the story to dinner in Sharjah, and the chairman of the Mashriq Bank was sitting next to me. So it didn't go down very well, not as well as tonight. So, but the point is that the debt is the killer. And as Moeen said, I prepared this letter on behalf of the people of Burngreave. Burngreave is a community in Sheffield. So I wrote this open letter to Cameron and Clegg on behalf of the people of Burngreave, as I'm now presenting 2 shows a week on the local radio, and every day we're talking about monetary reform. We're actually trying to get the ordinary people, our cousins and brothers and sisters, to know that the power is within their hands to actually change things. We don't have to accept austerity. This is an age-old game that they've played, and we are being played for suckers again. They're wanting us to actually use what I call the Dunkirk spirit. There's no necessity for us to actually tough this out. It's nonsensical. But they're wanting the British to actually withstand something, and people throughout the world, that is not necessary. So the letter actually addressed to Cameron and Clegg. I delivered the copy to Downing Street, and I also handed it to Nick Clegg's secretary in Sheffield on Friday, and he was doing a surgery, so we know he's actually got there. Now, but one point in this that sums up the problem is on page 5, where Professor Hodson, who's done the deficit made me do it, pointed out that this was in 1992, that at that point he said that wages have risen over the past 50 years by 2,700%. But however, over the same period, tax revenues have gone up by 3,400%, and net interest by 26,000%. So that surely puts into perspective the problem is not higher wages, because people are producing wealth. If you put $1 million on the flight deck, it's never going to fly you to anywhere, or $1 million on the piano, it will never play Mozart. So these producers of real wealth are being now asked to do something which is totally unnecessary. And the present situation could actually be resolved within 72 hours, as I mentioned in the letter. But, and I'll show you the reason why, that when the banks collapsed in 1914, John Bradbury, who was the Secretary to the Treasury, in conjunction with David Lloyd George, Bradbury issued 500 million Treasury notes to stop the crash of the Bank of England that happened in August 1914. So with the Treasury issued 500 million. Now they call Bradbury's because John Bradbury's name is on here, and it's the first time a Treasury note ever had the King's head on it. So this is called quantitative easing, 1914 style. We could do it then, we could do it today. What they're talking about is complete. Somebody said, I think it was Hugh Kingsman, and probably Peter will correct me, said about the people in the city that they were excrement living on increment. And really, this is what we have. The City of London is our greatest enemy and has been for 300 years. And I'll tell you the reason why I say that. This is a solution. that could be done today. We could go down the road and say, right, Treasury, issue, what are we short of, 70 billion? Actually, you could retire the debt through, instead of borrowing money, we retire it through money that is created by us and stood behind buyers. So you could actually liberate us from the debt and any recurring debt. But of course, that is the problem, because this is a little place called Revolution House. And I happened to pass by it 15 years ago and didn't realize what it was. I went back a week ago, and Revolution House, it says, is where the conspirators planned to bring Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell, who was past coming in, not to bring Cromwell, but to bring William of Orange into power and this was planned in Revolution House, which is in New Whittington, and there's a plaque, a bronze plaque cast into the house commemorating that meeting. Now, at the meeting, at the Cock and Pie Knot, which is what was called is Magpies, and it's of Derbyshire. Now, it was the Earl of Danby, the Earl of Devonshire, Mr. John Darcy, the eldest son of the Earl of Holderness, and another party who we managed to find out who he was, because the curator at the museum that I went to see gave me the full name. It was Baron Henry Booth, Baron Delamere. Now, in 1688, this is where the plan was, to bring William of Orange back, and with that conspiracy, and I say conspiracy because they were conspirators, and they conspired to bring William, and he later that year landed at Brixham in Torbay, and he was financed with a loan of 1.2 million from the Wiesel Bank in Holland. And that 1.2 million was used to establish the Bank of England. It was levied on us, the British people, till the Day of Judgment at 8%, till Yom Qiyamah. So we're paying now, that 1.2 million is now in excess of £1 trillion and growing, which is small by comparison to other debts. But we're now expected to pay £70 billion this year in interest payments on a debt that should have died with William. Like our banker or the head of he should have died with him, but it didn't. So this is when the British were Amsterdammed, because the Dutch bankers came and we were Amsterdam, and we are still paying interest on the loans to William of Orange. And it's time. Now, when you're here at the last night of the proms, you know, every night like this, it should be Britons ever have been slaves, and have been for the past 300 years. We've fought everybody, every country, with the exception of Portugal, but everywhere else we've been enslaved with debt. And there's a brilliant operetta by Gilbert and Sullivan called Utopia Limited, in which the lyrics are so brilliant, and it's rarely performed. But he speaks, or they speak of, stupendous loans to foreign thrones. And this is our opening, was of course this kingdom is now suffering from these loans, and it's been going on for such a long time. Now, then there's a great character comes along called William Cobbett, and Cobbett was an MP here. He was notorious for his pamphleteering, and he was actually the scourge of the bankers. And he said, "I set out to read the Act of Parliament by which the Bank of England was created, and all the acts about loans and funds and sinking funds, and I soon began to perceive that the fate of the kingdom must finally turn upon what should be done with that accursed thing called the national debt. The sum at first borrowed was a mere trifle, 1.2 million. But that was very far from intending to stop at a trifle. The inventors knew well what they were about. Their design was to mortgage by degrees the whole country, all the lands, all the houses, all the property, and even all the labour, to those who lend their money to the state. The scheme, the crafty, the cunning, the deep scheme has from its ominous birth been breeding usurers of every description, feeding and fattening on the vitals of the country, till it has produced what the world never saw before, starvation in the midst of abundance." We have it again. So the following period, the idea of enforced austerity has always followed these games that the usurers